Right. Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a closer look at Bloomsbury Residences. This is a development that's been creating quite a buzz, especially in the media circle area.
Absolutely. There's a lot of anticipation surrounding this project, and we've got a good amount of information to go through today.
Yeah, you've dug up some fascinating insights on the land bidding process, the design of the residences themselves, the whole market dynamics of One North, even the potential for investors. So we've got a full plate today.
Yeah, the goal is to really dissect all of this so that our listeners can grasp what makes Bloomsbury Residences so noteworthy.
So let's kick things off with the land bidding. I mean, Media Circle seems to be a pretty hotbed for developers right now.
Oh, it definitely is. We focused on a few key land parcels, and the activity around them really underscores how sought after this location is. For instance, the Bloomsbury site, the tender for that closed back in January 2024, and the proposed launch for the residences is set for April 2025. Now, the price per square foot per plot ratio, or PSF/BPR as it's often called, came in at $11.91.
$11.91. Okay, so for those of us who don't spend all day looking at land bids, what does that number really tell us? I mean, beyond just, the cost for the developer.
Well, it's a critical starting point. Essentially, that $11.91 represents what the developer paid per square foot of allowable building area just for the land itself. And this ratio also has an impact on how dense the development can be, right? And to give that some perspective, there was a similar launch in a nearby tech hub about a year ago, and their PSF/PPR was around $11.50.
Huh.
So Bloomsbury's land cost is pretty comparable, which might suggest that the starting prices for the units will be in a similar ballpark.
Okay, interesting.
And the fact that this particular plot of land is being touted as a potential gold mine, well, that speaks volumes about the strong demand that's anticipated.
Right. And we can't talk about land prices without touching on the elephant in the room, right? The government's role in all of this.
Oh, absolutely. The government's land policies are a major force in shaping the property landscape here. Their decisions influence developer confidence and ultimately the prices we see on the market. A great example of this is what happened with Media Circle Plot 2.
Okay, Plot 2. Now, remind me, the tender for that one closed in October 2024, right?
That's right.
And it had a plot ratio of 4.2, which, if I'm remembering correctly, means it had even more potential for density than the Bloomsbury site.
Yes, exactly. However, Plot 2 wasn't awarded to any developer.
And that was a pretty big deal, right? Why do you think that happened?
Well, the general consensus is that there was too much perceived risk, particularly due to the requirement for a service apartment component. You see, that signals that developers are being incredibly selective and cautious about mixed-use developments in this particular area.
Makes sense.
It also suggests that the government has a very clear vision for what they want Media Circle to be. Yeah, and they're not willing to just settle for any bid. Now, the really interesting thing is that this non-award could actually create what we call a protective effect for developments like Bloomsbury.
You mean because there's less competition?
Exactly. You see, the developers who were initially interested in Plot 2 might now shift their focus to the remaining opportunities. And that could intensify the demand for successfully bidded plots like Bloomsbury.
So in a way, a failed bid can actually boost the attractiveness of the winning bids.
Precisely. It also sends a subtle message about the government's preferences, which savvy developers will definitely factor into their calculations for future bids and projects.
Okay, that's fascinating. I mean, it really shows how understanding this whole land bidding landscape is crucial for evaluating a development like Bloomsbury Residences. It's not just about the building itself, it's about the bigger picture.
Absolutely, it's the first layer of the story.
Right. So with that in mind, let's shift our focus now to Bloomsbury Residences itself. They're using this tagline, "Comfort meets convenience," and they're talking about creating this vibrant community in the Media Police area. But what does that actually look like in concrete terms?
Well, while phrases like vibrant community can sometimes feel a bit like marketing jargon, the actual design and layout of the development suggests that there's real intentionality behind it. Now, for example, the artists' impressions, they highlight this modern architecture that's really integrated with green spaces. So it's about visual appeal and creating a genuinely pleasant living environment.
Right.
And the site itself, it spans 97,000 square feet, and they've been very careful in the way they've separated their residential and commercial spaces. That way, residents can enjoy privacy while still having easy access to all the amenities.
Okay, so let's break down those residential units. You mentioned there are 358 units in total, and it looks like they're really focusing on two-bedroom options.
Yes, two-bedroom units make up the majority, about 53% of the total. They range in size from 571 to 689 square feet. Okay. And that focus on smaller units aligns with what we're seeing in terms of demand from young professionals and smaller families.
Right.
You know, the kind of people who are drawn to the media circle area because of its proximity to workplaces and lifestyle options. Then you have the three-bedroom units. Those range from 900 to 1,098 square feet, so they provide more space for growing families. And then for larger households, there are four-bedroom units, which make up about 19% of the total. Those range from 11,173 to 420 square feet.
Okay, got it.
And of course, at the top end, you have the penthouse units. There are only a handful of those, just 2% of the total. So those are going to be highly coveted for sure.
I bet.
Now, it's something that I think is worth highlighting is that across all these unit types, the designs really emphasize efficient layouts and maximizing natural light.
Right. Two key considerations for modern living.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about the residential side, but you also mentioned there's a significant amount of commercial space incorporated into Bloomsbury residences, something like over 4,000 square feet. So how does that factor into the overall picture?
Well, that commercial space adds a huge layer of convenience. Having things like cafes and grocery stores right there on site means that residents can take care of their daily needs without even having to leave the development.
Yeah, that's a big plus.
It really is. And it creates this nice balance between having the peace and quiet of a residential setting and the accessibility of having everything you need right at your doorstep.
Right, that's smart. So beyond just the individual units and the commercial spaces, what about the overall community vibe that Bloomsbury Residence is going for? You know, what about the landscaping and those sorts of things?
Well, they've included things like beautiful gardens, walking paths, and communal spaces. These are all elements designed to foster a genuine sense of community among the residents. You know, encourage people to get to know their neighbors and create those social connections.
It's not just about living in an apartment building. It's about feeling part of something.
Exactly. And having those centralized facilities and a design that maximizes unblocked views, yeah, it all contributes to a peaceful and connected atmosphere.
Makes sense. Okay, so it's really a holistic living experience they're aiming for.
That's right. And that focus on community and convenience, those are significant advantages that set Bloomsbury residences apart.
Okay, great. So we've gotten a good sense of Bloomsbury itself, but now let's zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture, the market in the One North area as a whole. What's the demand and supply situation like there?
Well, right now, the demand for units in One North it's incredibly high. We're talking about occupancy rates of around 93%.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
It really is. And there are a few key drivers behind that strong demand. You know, the area is a major employment hub, so you have a lot of professionals looking for housing. Then you have the access to reputable schools, which is always a draw for families. And then there's the growing number of lifestyle amenities, which makes it a very attractive place to live overall.
Right.
So you have this high demand environment, and then into that comes Bloomsbury Residences with its 358 units launching in April 2025.
So how do you think this influx of new supply is going to affect the market dynamics?
Well, while 358 units is a sizable addition, when you consider the existing high occupancy rates in the area, it's unlikely to create a major downturn in demand. However, it will certainly introduce new options for buyers and renters, which will create some competition, of course, and potential buyers are going to be comparing Bloomsbury with other projects in the area, like One North Eden, Blossom Park, you know, looking at things like pricing, unit sizes, amenities, really trying to figure out which development best fits their needs and budget.
Right. So in terms of those comparisons, what can we glean from the rental yields and the potential for resale value appreciation in the surrounding area?
Well, the average rental yield in One North is pretty attractive. It hovers around 4 to 5%. And that suggests a healthy return for investors. And this strong rental market is further supported by the high ratio of rental transactions to listings within a 1 kilometer radius of the Bloomsbury site. Now, So that really indicates a robust demand for rental properties in that specific area. Now, when it comes to resale value, the general expectation is a positive trend over the next 3 to 5 years, and that's fueled by the ongoing development and the desirability of One North as a whole.
So strong underlying demand coupled with decent rental yields and the potential for price appreciation makes Bloomsbury Residences a pretty interesting proposition.
It does.
All right, so let's get down to brass tacks here. Let's talk about the profit potential for investors.
Okay, so based on what we're seeing in the current market, projections suggest a potential return on investment, or ROI, of around 15 to 20% over the next 5 years.
15 to 20%, that's not bad.
No, it's not. And that projection is based on an anticipated launch price of around $2,500 per square foot, and then factoring in the expected appreciation in the market. Another thing that supports those positive projections is the diverse buyer demographic that's attracted to this area. You have young professionals, families, even retirees, all drawn to the modern living and the accessibility of the location. And that kind of diverse demand really helps to underpin resale values.
Okay, so for those who are thinking about resale, what are some of the strategies they might consider?
Well, some investors might opt for a shorter-term resale strategy, trying to capitalize on that initial price appreciation that often happens right after launch. Others might prefer a longer-term approach, focusing on the strength of the rental market in the area. So generating consistent income from rentals and then potentially selling at a higher price down the road, right? And given the healthy rental demand that we see in the vicinity of Bloomsbury, that suggests a pretty reliable income stream for those who go the rental route.
There's flexibility there, which is good.
Exactly. And that flexibility, along with the other factors we've discussed, adds to the overall investment appeal of Bloomsbury Residences.
Okay, great. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the land bidding, the design, the market dynamics, the profit potential. So to wrap things up, let's zoom out one more time and think about the future of living in Media Circle with Bloomsbury Residences as a prime example.
Well, I think Bloomsbury Residences really embodies the evolving lifestyle of Media Circle. Mm-hmm. Its prime location provides excellent connectivity. You have upcoming MRT lines, the autonomous bus networks. Mm-hmm. It's also close to educational institutions, retail options, and green spaces. Mm-hmm. So it all comes together to create a very well-rounded and attractive living environment.
And for potential investors, when you compare the projected launch prices for Bloomsbury with existing developments in the wider One North area like One North Eden or Norm Parket, it seems like Bloomsbury is positioned pretty competitively.
It does, and with a calculated break-even price of around 2,076 PSF PPR, there seems to be room for growth as demand in Media Circle continues to strengthen.
Yeah, that break-even point is a good benchmark to keep in mind. It suggests that there's potential for appreciation as the area matures and demand continues to rise. However, we do have to acknowledge the lower bids that we saw for Media Circle Plot 2. That indicates that there is some caution out there about the possibility of oversupply in the future.
True, but that could actually end up working in favor of developments like Bloomsbury.
How so?
Because it could limit the amount of competition that comes online in the coming years.
Right. Okay. So for anyone listening who's intrigued by what they've heard today about Bloomsbury Residences, who wants to learn more about this, you can reach out to PK at 969-71131. They can provide more detailed information, answer any specific questions you might have. Okay, great. Well, we've unpacked a lot today about Bloomsbury Residences. The prime location, the thoughtful design, the strong market dynamics of One North, the compelling profit potential. But as we wrap up here, I'm curious. What other emerging trends do you think are going to significantly influence property investment decisions in these well-connected urban hubs like Media Circle in the coming years? It's definitely something for everyone to keep in mind as they consider their next steps.
Absolutely. It's all about staying informed, both about those broader trends and about the specifics of developments like Bloomsbury Residences. That's how you make the most informed investment decisions possible.
All right, great advice. Well, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.